Welcome to Nights at the Round Table, a monthly book club for speculative fiction, science fiction, and fantasy books. This episode, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. Alright, I think it's about time to get started on the book. So I usually start with your general impressions of the book. How did you find it? And this can be anything, like the plot points, tropes, and for yourself, the narrator.
Okay, well, the narrator was fine. I found for me the first not quite two-thirds, but almost two-thirds of the book, they're overly descriptive to the point that I felt fatigued. That I especially with the dinner scenes. I'm not a foodie. I expect if you're a foodie, you would love that, but I was just like, are you gonna get to some action and magic and some kind of point soon? Like so I think I had a different experience than you. But you read more high fantasy than I do. I'm more of an urban fantasy type, right? So I'm looking for more action and whatnot. When I read the synopsis of a book, I'm like, I should love this. It sounds amazing. But it took so long for me to find, what was happening. And with the descriptiveness, it was so much that I couldn't tell what was really important to the story. It wasn't when you read about the Door of Mordor and you're like, that's gonna be important, So elaborately describe that because it's an integral part of Lord of the Rings, right? So
Yeah.
you get that right away, right? It was like there's a lot here. And one of the descriptions in particular was odd for me. It was like bubbling light. And I'm like, I've never seen lights bubble. So I don't so that kind of threw me out.
That's more than fair, yeah.
Yeah. But I found once you got to just before part four there, it started to actually come together. And I felt like things are finally happening. But I did find that it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet story by the end. Only they lived, sort of. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. I feel sort of let down that it turned into a romance. I don't know, I don't know.
In that we can agree. So romance is not my favorite thing in the world. I don't mind it when it's part of a story, and perhaps integral to the plot, maybe. I do mind when it is the entire story.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for that, then you want it to be primarily labeled as a romance, right?
Yeah.
And this is it is high fantasy sort of, but it's also ultimately a romance. And it doesn't it kind of just twisted that way suddenly, and you were like, oh, she's not gonna just kill her opponent. She's going to fall in love with him. Great.
Yeah. So for myself, on the romance point, we can agree. But I absolutely loved the descriptions in the story. I loved the language. Reading it was a delight. It flowed so beautifully. That said, there weren't any phrases that stuck out to me as especially stunning. Like sometimes when you read a passage, you just have to put the book down for a little bit and just go, that was amazing. You have to sit with it for a bit. That never happened to me for this book. But I really did love the style of the writing. One of my favorite things about it was that it was in third person present, which is not really a tense that we get very often in books. It's either first person or third person past, right? Lots of wases and went, but this time it's is and goes. And it created for me this incredible sense of immediacy and intimacy that I think first person tries to go for, but ultimately fails for me. I don't like first person writing. I'm sorry to everybody who loves it. You're welcome to love it. It's just, it's not for me. Because every time a character does something that I wouldn't do, it immediately pulls me out of the story because it said, I did this. And I'm like, I would not. No.
That's fair.
Nope. So yeah, it created for me what I think first person does for an awful lot of other people. That immediacy and intimacy with the characters without all the stuff that I hate about first person perspectives. So I really loved that. And it also read a little bit like a bunch of vignettes. Like every time a scene changed, my mind immediately went like fade to black, open up onto the next scene, which I think was part of the style of the writing. And again, it's not something that you get often in books or not done well in books. And I feel like this one did it well. Yeah. There's a lot about this book that I really loved. And then a lot that I didn't. So I'm going to hit on the stuff that I loved. First, I really loved the intro, the short passage marked anticipation, right at the beginning of the book. And I loved that the first line of the book, the very first line of the book is, the circus arrives without warning. And then that is also the very last line of the book. So it ties this book in a nice, neat little circle, and you realize sort of like the intro, the anticipation, might have been Widget talking to the man in grey, because that's exactly how Widget starts his story at the very final end of the book. And that was just, it was so beautifully done. And there are other books who have attempted to bookend in this way that have failed. I'm not going to name names because it's going to earn me a lot of hate from the stands, but I am thinking of one in particular that tried it and it felt like a high school project. And this one didn't. It was just beautifully executed. Loved it.
Maybe you can tell me what that is offline.
Well, you know what? I'll invite the hate. It was In the Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. I didn't like it, I'm sorry. I didn't like it. And let the hate commence. Sorry, everybody who loved it. Wasn't for me. And that whole intro, the anticipation part, is written in the first person. But I think because of the style of the writing, it felt more like someone describing something to you rather than the author trying to make it so that you experience it yourself. It's so hard. The distinction is so hard for me to explain. It's like when somebody's telling you a story and they're telling it really, really well, and they'll use words like, and then you, but you know it's not you, right? It's like a nebulous you. A general you. Where in a lot of first-person narratives, it feels like you specifically did this thing. And I'm like, no, I didn't. But in this, it didn't feel like that. And
I
it
feel
was
like
beautifully done.
I feel like first person is good when you are new to reading or you haven't been reading for a long time. Like I feel like it's for a less experienced reading audience
Oh,
sometimes.
yeah? Oh,
I don't know.
maybe.
Like
I
I
don't know.
found
I
it
know a
good
lot
when
of...
I was getting back in, but like these days I prefer the third person, so
Yeah, I've always
yeah.
preferred the third person. But I know like a lot of people who are big readers and they're like, I just can't get into a book if it's third person the way that I can if it's first. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fair, I guess. But
Yeah, I had
it's the
trouble
exact
getting
opposite
into
for
this
me.
one. I had trouble getting into this one and like getting to the point where I really cared about the characters. And maybe it's the point of view, that it just didn't like grip me.
I didn't care about the main characters. I cared an awful lot about many of the periphery characters.
Yeah, maybe it's just that the main characters are kind of, I don't know, flat.
Maybe. I have to say, when I first met the man in grey, have you read the book Oversea Under Stone?
No.
Okay, it's by Susan Cooper. It was my favorite book growing up. It's the first in the Uh, there was a series of books called The Dark is Rising.
Okay.
Overseer Stone felt like such its own little thing. And I don't like the rest of the series, but this one book I absolutely love. And there's a character in there, the pastor, who the man in grey struck me as like the pastor so much. He's not described physically in this as he is so much in Overseer Stone. Like in Overseer Stone, he has a hooked nose and he's tall and he's lean, slightly gaunt. But every time the man in grey showed up, his demeanor and his words were so much like the pastor. He's not really the pastor. From Overseer Stone, that I was just like, oh man, this is bringing me back. So maybe that like emotional connection, because I love Overseer Stone so much, helped me tie into the book. Though I do have to say, Prospero / Hector can go die in a fire. That man is psychotic.
Yes, agreed. I did not like her father at all.
No.
Like, horrible
Yeah.
human.
Yeah,
Like,
right?
both of their fathers for engaging in this agreement where one of their children has to die. Like,
One of their children.
yeah,
And
like
like
what is
Prospero
that?
has lost every single challenge. So he's okay with just raising this
Yeah,
girl and then just sending her off to die, because that's what's going to happen. Because it's happened every
yeah.
other time. Yeah, he was awful. Absolutely awful. I physically nearly threw my phone when I read about the fingertip cutting scene. What a monster. I mean, they were both monstrous in their way, but Prospero especially.
Yes. Agreed.
Ugh, what an ass. So we've already talked a lot on the things that we didn't like, and it really is only the one thing that I didn't like, is that it was essentially a romance story, and I am not a fan at all of the enemies to lovers trope.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I don't like it either. I know a lot of people like because I'm in a couple of groups for like sapphic fiction, and some of them are looking for that all the time. But I'm also not much of a slow burn kind of person. I might have ADHD, so that's probably part of that. But I did find like with this book, the prose was very pretty. So
yeah, the
there is
prose was
that.
beautiful,
Yeah.
which can be distracting, I suppose, for people who don't fall easily into that. And I can understand that people wouldn't. But I adore language so much, and when it's used beautifully, I'm just like, oh, I'm in heaven. I don't care if this description doesn't make actual sense, like the bubbling lighting. It's just so pretty.
See, I do care. It needs to make sense to me. It's like light doesn't bubble unless it's like, I don't know, underwater.
Unless it's lava.
Like, yeah, exactly.
No, I totally get that. And I'm like, that description really doesn't make sense, but it flowed so beautifully.
See, you get pulled out when the character is saying that, I'm doing something and you wouldn't do that. It's for me, it's like when something doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? That's what
Which
pulls me out.
Which ostensibly is the more clever thing to be pulled out by if something doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, my dumbass is just like, yeah, I accept that. No critical thought whatsoever. Sure, light bubbles, that sounds beautiful. Nope,
Magic light. It's magic
magic
special
light.
light, so it bubbles.
Yes. Yeah, the enemies to lovers trope is horribly cringy. I've not ever read something with an enemies to lovers trope that didn't make me cringe, unless it is specifically making fun of that particular trope.
For me, I think like what's not done well with it most of the time is it's like, if like if I've dated enough to know that sometimes you do end up, liking someone that you didn't fall with because you misunderstood everything about them, It's not just like I'm supposed to hate you because my family says so. And and I'm gonna be a rebel if I could talk. I'm gonna rebel against my parents and yeah, the way it is with, Romeo and Juliet and in this case kind of I don't know.
Sort of. I liked
Sort of.
that.
It's like a little better done in this one, but yeah.
Yeah, of the enemies to lovers tropes that I've read, this is the best one that I've seen or read, but I still don't like the trope.
Yeah, I don't either.
I do like how the main characters showed their admiration for each other in trying to one up each other magically.
Yeah. See, I
Like,
didn't find that the magic was, I found it was really subtly there, though. And
which
so
I
you need a
really
good
enjoyed.
imagination.
Yeah, which is why I liked that the prose was so descriptive because I want to walk in that ice garden. It felt so tangible to me the way that it was written. Like I could see it. Like the rose smelling faintly of rose and ice and crumbling when you touched it because it's ice. And it felt so tangible. It's like really well done and I want one. I could live there in the summertime. Give me an ice garden. And then the labyrinth was sort of their love story to each other, right? One room would be added, and then somebody else would add another room, and then another room, and then another room. And in this way, they collaborated. And it was less a competition as it was, I see what you've done. Let me show you this thing. Or at least that's the way it felt for me. And if they hadn't been enemies to lovers, if they had just been like two people who had met who could do magic, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's actually quite romantic. Not that I know what romance is because I don't, but except for what I've read. But I'm like, that's really cool. I like that. It wasn't like I'm going to buy you this flower and expect things from you. It's like, I'm going to show you how much I admire you by building this thing that complements what you have done.
Yeah. See,
And I
romance is
liked that.
different things to different people. So, you know, you
Uh,
can say that you don't know what romance is, but romance for you is just different than, some people who are just lazy and just buy flowers. Because oftentimes flowers are bought because someone made a mistake. That's not a,
oh dear.
so I
Aw.
don't find them very, very romantic sometimes either. It's like, I've been an idiot lately. Not
Yeah.
I want to show you appreciation. But then, you're killing something to
I
give
know,
someone,
right? I never understood flowers. This is just a personal thing. I don't like getting flowers. Buy me whiskey or swords or something, not flowers. Here, I really like you. So I plucked the sex parts of a plant to give to you.
they smell nice
They
and look
smell.
nice. That's what,
Give me a potted plant rather than a flower then. But yeah, no, I never understood flowers.
or like potpourri or something.
Yeah, right? Uh, yeah. So I do appreciate how they showed their admiration for each other. It felt less a declaration of love in this instance than like uh, an admission of respect for one another. So I like the way that was done. It's a pity they were in actual competition. Also, I
I
really want to
felt
punch Hector.
I felt like there were points when I was listening to it that Marco knew before she did.
Yes, he did.
And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that given that they ended up in a relationship. Like, was he always trying to score the girl, Or and like I guess she found out before him like what the ultimate ending was supposed to be.
Yes.
Um, I don't know. It's just I find like a lot of the book was interesting in some way, like how the circus is actually run is basically on the souls of the dead. Just kind of macabre if you think about that.
Was it though? I thought it was. There
Well,
was
they're
because
kind of
Celia
dead.
was.
I mean,
Well, it is now. It is. Yes. Yeah. Basically, if the circus ends, Celia and Marco both just, I guess, fade away.
I guess.
I guess because they're tied to the
And
place, right? So if it no longer exists, do they exist
and
anymore?
everyone else who lost before as well will actually truly be gone.
Well, I thought they were already truly gone, right? I thought that
What,
the
like, I thought Bailey was one of the ones that died before because he committed suicide, right?
Bailey? No.
I thought he was the one who went up against what's her name?
To Tsuka? Or...
Yes, yes.
No,
Tsuku.
she went up against another woman who ended up being a pillar of ash outside of Kyoto, because they were also in love. And when this other woman discovered what the end game was, she decided to kill herself rather than kill the woman she loved.
Hmm.
Bailey was the young boy who fell in love with Poppet, and
Ah.
right at the end took over custody of the circus in order to free Celia and Marco so that they don't fade away trying to maintain the damn thing. So that they can haunt the place forever until it ends, I guess.
Okay, there was something that I read earlier today in the synopsis about Bailey having, I don't know. I will try to find it, but you can continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was quite late at night last night when I finished this, so I might be wrong, but I'm fairly certain Bailey was the young man he was the farm boy who fell in love with Poppet and then ended up chasing the Night Circus because when he decided to join the circus, at long last, they had already moved on. They'd left early. So he chased them with the rest of the rêveurs, only to come just a little bit too late to save the physical forms of Marco and Celia. And so in order to save them in their sort of ethereal state, because it was Celia who was maintaining the circus, and it was Marco who was protecting it with his fire, right?
Okay, it
So
was Tsukiko's opponent that committed suicide.
yes, because they were in
Yes.
love, and
Yeah.
her opponent didn't want to kill Tsutsiko. And so she set herself on fire in a field outside of Kyoto.
So they all just keep falling in love.
Apparently that's the game. You find people who are your match, and then because they are your match, even when they go in opposition, they fall in love or something. I don't know. Is that how love works? I don't know.
And of course they're always, heterosexual.
Well, no. Tsutsiko's opponent was a woman.
Oh wait, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So this particular
See, I would
story.
rather read that story, but
Um, my fondness for
personally.
my fondness for tragic endings has been well noted. So yeah, I would rather read that story too.
I know you have scarred me with human.
You're welcome.
It's that good kind. I was so mad when I first read it. I'm like, but it couldn't have went any other way. That's like it's a perfect ending.
See, that's what I thought too, and people still get mad at me, but whatever. I don't mind, get mad. It means I did my job. Yeah, so I do love a tragic ending. I think I would love to read Tsutsiko's story. I'd
Yeah.
love to read that. Even though I know I'm going to be sobbing by the end because yeah, the ending of this one made me go, so they're just basically force ghosts now wandering
Yeah.
around the circus. Oh, Jackie, hey! We have a commenter.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, that's so they're together forever now, I guess, but can't interact with the world anymore, really.
They can't interact with anything outside of the circus, but because they built stuff
Yeah.
in the circus, they can interact with that and I guess each other.
Yeah.
And then I guess when the circus ends, they just cease.
I guess. Currently it can't end, but yeah. It says that it's been preserved for over a century. That's what the synopsis indicates, that the circus is just still going.
To be honest, that opening introduction made me want to go visit that circus. I would line up in the evening autumn chill and just go through that circus. I loved it. The descriptions of everything, I think. I'm like, this place sounds literally magical. It was literally magical, but if they could recreate that in the real world, I would love to wander around that circus.
Well, I mean, you might just be let down. I think they're trying to turn it into like a TV show or something at some point.
Oh, I can. It would. I think this
But
one would
it's been
be.
optioned by Summit, so it
Ooh.
could be coming someday.
I mean, it feels like it would be difficult to adapt just because of the. I mean, the imagery you can easily translate to screen. They've described it so perfectly and so beautifully. Like I saw it running like a movie in my head. But the problem is the sort of the vignette style of each scene. I'm not sure that audiences would appreciate that, so I doubt that's the direction they would go. But it would lose something without that vignette
It's
thing.
gonna lose something anyway because, some of those descriptions and the elaborateness, they're probably not gonna like budget wise, they're gonna be like, I don't
Oh,
know.
I don't
And like
know.
some of the
TV has
characters they
become.
might yeah, so it looks like it might be a film adaptation for Lionsgate. I don't know.
Oh.
So it's the film and TV rights were optioned in 20 in by Summit, and then they did hire someone in 2012 to write the screenplay. In February 2019, it was announced that Jeremy Jasper would direct the film adaptation. So it looks like they're going with a film right now, but maybe it'll turn into a TV show after.
Oh,
Could end up as
maybe.
both, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of a thing these days.
I mean, there's potential if it's done well. I'm always wary of adaptations because I
Yeah.
find that they're so rarely done well.
But I do find it interesting. So like we've both had the spectrum of experiences with this because like early on I felt like my brain wanted to go have an adventure outside of reading the book. And when I look at the reviews of the book, it's like we've had the gamut of the experiences.
Oh, really?
Like I didn't completely hate it. By the end, I felt like okay, there was some good in it, you know. And I did read that a lot of people got more out of it on the second read. So
Oh,
I might listen to it again. I don't know. I might need a break.
yeah.
Um, um, but yeah, so a lot of people were like, "This is awful," and then other people were like, "This is the best book ever." Like,
Oh, no, I wouldn't go that far. It's not the best book ever. I did rate it quite highly, um,
yeah.
which is
I
unusual for
haven't
me, but
rated it yet. I'm gonna give it another chance, I think, before I rate it.
I rated it for the descriptions and the uniqueness of the style of writing and how easily I fell into this world and how much I fell in love with some of the periphery characters. The main characters really didn't do it for me, but the periphery characters, there were some of them I was just like, oh, this is wonderful. Um, but not it. I honestly didn't rate it for the plot. If I had rated it for the plot, it would be at best a 2.5 star. Um,
Yeah, that was my issue, is the plot.
Yeah, everything else around it though was so beautifully done. I ended up rating it quite highly, which is very unusual for me, but I love when language is done beautifully. And they did it beautifully. Well done. They did it so beautifully that I could overlook the romance and the enemies to lovers tropes, which is my least favorite kind of romance.
Same.
Yeah. All right, we're almost done at the end of the stream. So, if you were to give this a star rating, what would you give it? And what would be your final thoughts on the matter?
So I hate rating systems. They're too subjective. Like your number means different things than my number, right? But like for me right now, it would be like a 3.5, I think. But I think it's because I need to have a second pass on it. My initial like overall was like eh, there was a lot of telling and not a lot of showing for me, but um and that's like something you can learn from as a writer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that it does have some depth to it that's worth exploring. And that I will get more from it when I have a second pass.
I gave it a 4.75. It was near perfect. Um, and I can do that on, because I am not using Goodreads anymore. I got frustrated with it. I do not like it. So I'm using this thing called Storygraph. There's an app.
Okay.
This is the app. Oh, you can't really see it on my phone. But it's kind of like Goodreads, but it gives you, first of all, it gives you quarter stars, which is fantastic. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, this book was good. It wasn't as bad as a 3-star book, but it definitely wasn't a 4-star book. Can I get somewhere in between, please? And this lets you do it. And also the way it analyzes the data of your reading styles and stuff is really cool. So yeah, I use Storygraph, so I gave it a 4.75 because I can on Storygraph. Yeah, the only thing that ruined it for me was the romance. That sounds awful. I sound so heartless. But I mean, the rest of the book it felt ethereal, I think is the word that I'm looking for. There was something ethereal about the writing style that allowed me to kind of just float away for a while, and I really enjoyed that about the book. So yeah, 4.5 stars for me. 4.5, 4.75, 4 3/4. Can anybody do math? What's that average out to? Like a 4? Right?
Is 4.125.
4.125. Yeah, so 4. Look at you, brain. Well done. Yeah, so an average of 4 stars. I don't think that's bad at all. And yeah, if you're a romance reader, I think you'll really like this book, provided that you're okay with some pretty elaborate descriptions.
Yeah, especially if you love food.
That's true. Although I wouldn't consider myself a foodie. Like, just give me a burger with bacon on it and I'm pretty happy. But I really did like the descriptions of food. Right, so I guess now we have to choose the next book. I have a Doohickey Whatsumitjigit. And by Doohickey Whatsumitjigit, I mean...
A randomizer?
A randomizer, a spinner wheel. So I'm just going to try and figure this thing out.
Horus Rising.
Horus Rising by Dan Abnett. Okay. Ooh, that's interesting. Okay, so this is part of the oh god.
Warhammer 40K.
Yeah, it's part of the Warhammer 40K. Oh, there
The
we go.
Horus Heresy #1.
Mm-hmm. So there are like 400 books in this series, as far as I'm aware. That's a lie. I think it's closer to 40. And this is the first book in that series. And I remember I included this one in the requests because I remember somebody talking about it. And I'm like, you know what? Warhammer. Oh, and there was a game. There was a game that my friend John streamed that was in the Warhammer universe. And I'm like, actually, this story is really good. It's basically knights against space orcs, but whatever. But it was really good. Like, I really enjoyed the story of the game. I'm like, oh, this is a world that maybe I could get into. So that's why I included it. And that's why we're going to be reading it for next month. If you want to suggest a book, you will need an app called Book Clubs. It's bookclubs.com. You can access it online. And we are Knights at the Round Table. That's the name of our book club. Okay, yeah, so it's bookclubs.com/knights-at-the-round-table. And you can go in there, you can join our book club, and then under books we want to read, you can make suggestions. And those suggestions will go up on the roulette wheel, and then next time we will choose from them. So right now, only my suggestions up there, because I'm really the only active member of that book club. For many very good reasons. Everybody is super busy. So yeah, do that. I will leave the links. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll try and remember to leave the links down below. If you're watching this on Twitch, I will post the link into chat. There we go. Link posted. Yeah, join us there. There's discussions where you can talk about all of the books that we've been reading long after the episodes are up. If you're just watching this on YouTube, that's cool too. You can discuss down below. Did you like the book? Did you hate it? Why? Why not? How awful are we that we don't like romance?
I do like romance. Just like I like I like going in knowing that I'm gonna be reading a romance, you know?
That's,
Like it's
yes, warn us beforehand.
I
All
shouldn't
right,
have to look it up to
brilliant.
find out.
Thank you so much for joining me, Ray. I really appreciate it. This was a fantastic discussion. You're welcome anytime. I will send you a link for our private Facebook group where we
Sounds
do all
good.
the volunteering stuff. Yeah. Where can everybody find you online? Your Insta, Facebook, if you have one, and Twitch.
If you go to therightbuttons.ca or if you're on Twitch, you just type in the right buttons, spelled WRITE. And that's my Insta as well. Yeah.
Awesome sauce. And I am SM Carrière on most things. I'm not on Twitter anymore. You can find me on Spoutable instead at the handle SM Carrière because I am nothing if not consistently dull when it comes to naming my social media presences. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll see you next month. The book is Horus Rising by Dan Abnett. Do join us for that discussion. Oh, English. Discussion. Okay, bye.